My name is Harper Quinn, and I'm 36 years old. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting in a beige lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning reviewing paperwork that listed my childhood home not under my name, but my mother's and sister's, I would have laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded too absurd to be possible. And yet there I was, holding a pen that shook in my hand, looking at my own name typed in bold under the section labelled co-signer without equity rights. That moment wasn't a beginning, it was a culmination. The slow boil that started years earlier masked as family responsibility, now bubbling over into legal betrayal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Last week, my sister Riley called. Her voice was syrupy sweet in that way it always was when she needed something. "Hey Harps, so tiny thing came up with Toby's business pitch. You know that VR gym thing he's working on? We're thinking of bringing in a seed investor. Just a soft start. You could help us draw up the financial projections, right? Just a couple days of work. No pressure." Except there was always pressure. Always that laced undertone of "you're the stable one, the smart one, the one who owes us." I should have said no, but I didn't. Again. I live in a modest duplex off East Cesar Chavez in Austin. 2 bedrooms, 1 barely used, unless you count my laptop and files as roommates. I'd built a quiet life, contract work and data analysis, solid savings monthly therapy with Dr. Lennox. And a yoga class I actually stuck with for once. I didn't party, I didn't ask for help, I didn't spend beyond my means. But that self-control, that peacefulness, none of it mattered when family called. Especially my family. Our dynamic always played out the same. Riley the show pony, Toby the burden disguised as baby brother. And my mother, Vivian. She was the conductor of the whole damn circus, poised, respected, and manipulative in ways so subtle they passed for concern. "We only ask you because we trust you," she'd say, every time they needed my credit score, my bank account, my time. Trust. What a weapon. I was 12 the first time I realized that in our family, love was conditional. That summer, Riley got accepted to an elite arts camp in Colorado. It cost more than our family could afford, but somehow Mom found a way. Meanwhile, I got a paper route to buy my own back-to-school shoes. "You're good with money," she told me. "It's a gift." No, it was an excuse. A justification for funneling everything into Riley into appearances. It was easier to paint me as the independent one than to admit they were choosing her. That conditioning ran deep. So when Riley asked for help with Toby's startup, I spent 2 nights cleaning up his disaster of a pitch deck. The numbers made no sense. His expenses exceeded projected revenue by 3 hinun, and there was no tech team, just his roommate who watched a lot of YouTube tutorials. I sent Riley a blunt report. "This is not viable. No investor would touch this." She didn't reply. The silence lasted until Sunday night, when Mom texted, "Can you come to dinner tomorrow?" Just family. We met at Uchi, a sushi spot. That's the kind of upscale, trendy place people in my neighborhood joke about needing a loan to afford. Riley was already seated, nails gleaming, laughing with Toby, like they hadn't just tried to guilt-trip me into co-signing a fantasy. Vivian arrived 10 minutes late, of course. She always made an entrance wearing her signature silk scarf, this time royal blue, with a pearl pin like a queen in exile. She kissed Riley's cheek, nodded at Toby, and gave me that assessing glance she reserved for people who disappointed her. "You look tired," she said. "Working too much." I didn't answer. I knew the script. Say nothing, make no waves get through dinner. And it was going fine until dessert. Over green tea ice cream, Vivian folded her napkin deliberately and looked at me. "I spoke with the mortgage officer this morning," she said. "It'll go smoother if you just sign. They already approved the refinancing." My blood went cold. "What mortgage officer?" I asked. Riley looked away. Toby sipped his sake. And my mother smiled. Harper, we added you as a co-signer to the house. Technically, the loan documents are ready, just need your signature. It's nothing binding, just procedural. That was a lie. A calculated, rehearsed lie. And they all knew it. I stood up so fast the chair screeched. My chest tightened, vision narrowing to a pinprick tunnel. You used my name, I whispered. Without telling me, Riley hissed, "Don't make a scene." But it was already a scene. People stared. I didn't care. You took my identity. You committed fraud. Vivian's eyes hardened. Don't be dramatic. It's family. We needed the loan to secure the renovation Riley's second bedroom needs conversion for Emma's tutoring. Emma, her daughter, not mine, not my responsibility. But in this family, boundaries were optional until I started drawing them. I walked out without paying, without hugging anyone. My hands were shaking as I reached my car, parked under a flickering streetlight on South Lamar. The air smelled like cedar smoke and exhaust. I sat in silence for 20 minutes, staring at the dashboard. A part of me, a scared, obedient part, wanted to go back in, apologize, smooth things over. But something deeper stirred. Not anger, not betrayal. Something older, heavier. Resolve. The next morning I called a lawyer, and that's when I found out it wasn't just the house. They had opened a second credit line last year under my name, and the repayment defaulted, which meant my credit score had already dropped. I sat there frozen as the lawyer turned the monitor to show me the statement, Toby's signature, Vivian's email, my name. And then he asked, "Ms. Quinn, did you authorize this?" My voice broke. No. His eyes narrowed. Then, we're dealing with a felony. When I stepped out of the lawyer's office, the heat hit me like a wave. Austin in August is the kind of humid that clings to your skin, but I didn't even feel it. My body moved on autopilot down the courthouse steps, across the sidewalk into my car, but inside I was unraveling. Identity theft. That was the phrase the lawyer had used. And my mother and brother hadn't just borrowed my name. They weaponized it. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so tight my knuckles blanched. My mouth tasted like copper. There was no accident, no misunderstanding, no poor communication. This was calculated. It had dates, signatures, bank routing numbers. The kind of betrayal you don't recover from with a family dinner and a group hug. Back home, I did what I always did when the world didn't make sense. I opened my laptop. If this was a storm, then numbers were my umbrella. I dug through old emails, bank statements, credit reports. The timeline painted itself in stark clarity 3 years ago. They'd used my name to open a joint home equity line for renovation purposes. A year later, another account, this time tied to a fake consulting business under Toby's name with me, listed as the silent partner. It was all there. Bold, undeniable. And the worst part, they'd been making minimum payments, just enough to keep me unaware. Until recently, when the late fees started, I called the lender. The woman on the phone confirmed everything with a dry, polite tone that made my skin crawl. "Yes, Ms. Quinn, your name is on both accounts. You were listed as the primary applicant on file. I asked for the voice verification logs." She hesitated. I insisted. The audio file arrived 30 minutes later. I clicked play. And there it was, Toby's voice, faking mine, stumbling over security questions like someone reciting a script he barely rehearsed. Date of birth? September 15th, 1987. My breath caught. He got it wrong. I was born in 1986. I forwarded the clip to my attorney with shaking hands. And that's when the numbness turned to fire. That moment, that exact second, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to fix this quietly anymore. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, email threads, loan documents. I even printed photos of Riley's remodel, her Instagram, where she'd proudly posted the before and after of her home office transformation, tagging #blessed, #thanks mom. That smug caption hit harder than any punch, because I'd paid for that wall of shiplap and didn't even know it. The next day I went to visit someone I hadn't seen in over a year. Dr. Lennox, my therapist. I hadn't booked a session, I just showed up. She saw my face and waved me in without a word. I sat down on the leather chair that always made a small sigh when I sank into it and began speaking before she even closed the door. They stole from me, Leanne. Not just money, my identity, my credit, my peace. They used my voice to commit a felony. She didn't interrupt. She let the silence fill the room like an exhale. When I was done, she said, "So what are you going to do next?" That question echoed in my mind the rest of the week. Because revenge is seductive, but accountability. That's harder. It requires paperwork, patience, and strategy. I wasn't going to slash their tires or show up screaming. I was going to dismantle them from the inside with evidence, with law, and with silence. I froze the credit lines, filed a police report, began the dispute process with the Federal Trade Commission, and then I called Emma's school, my niece. Riley had transferred her to a private prep academy downtown, one that cost nearly $32,000 a year. I pretended to be calling about financial aid options just to confirm the payment source. The office assistant put me on hold, came back and said cheerfully, "Oh, tuition is covered by the Riley Quinn Family Trust, co-signed by a Harper Quinn. Are you the aunt?" I hung up. My heart thundered. They were using my name to fund generational delusion. But the worst wasn't the trust fund. It came 3 days later in the form of a certified envelope left at my door. Inside was a legal document. Vivian had filed a petition of intent to grant power of attorney over financial decisions to Riley. Attached was a draft letter with my forged signature dated 2 months prior. They were going to take everything. I showed the document to my lawyer. He flipped through it with a scowl. "They're preparing to declare you mentally unstable, Harper," he said, bluntly. "They want to claim you're under stress, emotionally erratic, that you requested help managing your finances." I blinked. "They're trying to take guardianship." He nodded slowly. "They're framing this as elder prep, even though you're 36. It's rare but not unheard of, especially in cases where there's alleged trauma or instability. It's called a conservatorship." The air in my lungs turned to lead. My own family was building a case to have me declared legally incompetent. And it was working, because everything I'd done in the past week, calling banks, pulling files, showing up unannounced, could be twisted into a pattern. Because Riley worked in PR, because Vivian knew people, because Toby was too stupid to see what they were doing to me. Or maybe he didn't care, but I cared. And I had one thing they didn't. The full recording of our dinner at Uchi. Every word, every confession, every smug manipulative statement. And tomorrow morning, I was going to take it to someone who could help burn it all down. I sat in my car for a long time after walking out of the courthouse engine off the recording still playing through my earbuds. Riley's voice, confident and careless, echoed, "Harper won't even notice she never checks the statements. She's too obsessed with being independent." And Vivian's reply, cool and deliberate, "That's the beauty of it. She thinks silence is power." I replayed that moment 3 times, memorizing the cadence of their cruelty. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was coordinated theft. And more than that, it was erasure. They weren't just taking my money. They were rewriting the narrative of who I was turning me into, a fragile woman who needed their help. I turned off the audio, exhaled, and reached into the glove box where I kept a small leather notebook. My emergency ledger. I flipped to a clean page and wrote in all caps, "They're building a case. I'm building evidence." The next step wasn't going to be emotional. It had to be surgical. I hired a forensic accountant. His name was Saul, a quiet, hawk-eyed man with a faded tattoo on his wrist that hinted at a less buttoned-up past. He reviewed the documents I brought, squinted through wire-rimmed glasses and said, This isn't just sketchy. This is systemic. They're laundering within your own accounts. Whoever set this up knows what they're doing. I nodded. I already suspected Riley had help. She'd always had that untouchable charm valedictorian prom queen interned with a senator. She knew how to shape perception. I, on the other hand, was never the spotlight daughter. I was the safe one, the fallback, the utility. Saul dug through bank activity and flagged 2 shell LLCs, one registered in Toby's name, the other in Riley's. They were funneling money from credit lines under my name into these accounts, then redirecting to a third party listed as consulting services. But the address led to a UPS drop box in Round Rock. Fraud, wire transfer violations, tax evasion, the stack was growing. Still, none of that mattered if I couldn't prove intent. Paper alone wasn't enough. That's where Evan came in. Evan was a friend from college. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd gone into investigative journalism. Won an award for exposing Medicaid fraud in Texas. I found his number, buried in an old thread, texted him, "Need help." Personal. Might get ugly. He called 5 minutes later. I told him everything, no filter. At the end he exhaled and said, "Jesus, Harper. This is huge. If what you're saying checks out, you're not just looking at civil damages. This could go federal." I swallowed. I don't want revenge. I want distance, safety, proof. He paused. "You need to control the narrative before they bury you in theirs." That line stuck with me. Control the narrative. It's what Riley had done our entire lives, spinning lies with mascara smiles and PTA charm. Evan agreed to help. Not just legally, but publicly. He had contacts, podcasters, local news, even a family law expert who specialized in guardianship abuse. The plan wasn't just legal retaliation. It was exposure. Truth as defense. But exposure was risky. I knew that. If I stepped forward, I'd become the woman who turned on her own family. And for women, especially women, who look like they have it all together, the backlash is brutal. Society forgives manipulative mothers faster than daughters who say no. Still, I moved forward slowly. We gathered documents, phone logs, audio clips, Emma's school payments traced back to my accounts, and then the kicker, an email. Found in a data dump Riley left open on a shared Google Drive years ago, buried in an archived folder titled Home Projects. The email was from Vivian to Riley, dated 3 years ago. Subject endgame. Body. If Harper won't play nice, we play weak. We document her meltdowns. We get her flagged. You get control of the accounts. By the time she notices, she'll be too ashamed to fight. She always folds under guilt. Use that. I read it 10 times. Use that. My therapist once told me that narcissistic families don't always need fists. They weaponize memory. Rewrite history until you're no longer sure of what you lived. But this was a battle plan. I printed the email, labeled it Exhibit B. Exhibit A was the dinner recording, and then I made a decision that scared me. I called Vivian. She picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp and smiling. "Harper, I'm glad you called. How's therapy?" I didn't reply. I just said, I know about the accounts, the credit lines, the LLCs. I know about the petition. I have the email, the recording, everything. There was a long pause. Then her voice dropped cool, composed, lethal. "So what do you want?" "Harper money, an apology." I let silence hang for a moment. Then I said, "I want you to stop pretending I'm weak. I want you to know I'm not folding. I'm documenting. Every lie, every call, every forged form. You built this with paper. I'll bring it down with fire." She chuckled softly. "You're bluffing." I hung up. An hour later, I got a text from Riley. "You've gone too far. Hope you're ready for what's coming." What's coming? That night, Evan messaged me. He'd been contacted someone from Riley's law firm, threatening to sue for defamation if the story went public. But Evan had already sent the first draft to the Austin American Statesman. Publication scheduled 3 days from now. 3 days passed like a breath held too long. The morning the article dropped, I didn't wake up to coffee or sunlight. I woke up to 37 text messages, 6 missed calls, and a voicemail from Toby that began with, "What the hell did you do?" I didn't answer. I just opened the Austin American-Statesman's homepage. The headline sat there like a punch to the chest. Local woman's identity. Hijacked by her own family in guardianship power grab. My photo wasn't there. Evan had promised anonymity, but the details were damning. A 36-year-old data analyst. Family manipulation. Financial theft. The subtle machinery of coercive control inside middle-class America. The article outlined the entire timeline supported by documents. Evan had been thorough. He cited the shell companies, the fraudulent credit lines, even embedded part of the email where my mother instructed Riley to document her meltdowns. But what struck hardest wasn't the facts. It was the tone. Calm. Factual. Cold in the way truth should be. He painted a portrait not of a victim, but of a woman pushed to the brink, then dragged past it by the people who claimed to love her. By noon, it had gone viral in local Facebook groups. Parents from Emma's school were sharing it. A few even messaged me quietly, apologetically. We had no idea. Someone on Reddit reposted the story under Arthur Carl's legal advice. One comment stood out. "This sounds like conservatorship abuse." Anyone remember Brittany? But Vivian didn't respond publicly. Of course she didn't. That wasn't her style. She moved in silence. It started with a cease and desist letter delivered by courier to my apartment. Then came the lawyer's call. Vivian's attorney sharp-suited and syrup-voiced. "Ms. Quinn, my client, is offering a resolution. If you retract the article and sign a mutual NDA, they're willing to dissolve the financial entanglements quietly." I asked him, "Does your client also plan to apologize for fraud, identity theft, and emotional terrorism?" His pause was short but telling. "Let's keep this professional, Ms. Quinn. Professional." That word. Like this was a boardroom negotiation and not a daughter trying to reclaim the ruins of her life. I hung up, and that night someone slashed my tires. All 4. In the lot behind my building. There were no cameras, no witnesses, no proof, just silence. I called the police, filed a report, and then did something that surprised even me. I knocked on my neighbour's door. Clara, retired nurse, widow, never really spoke unless it was about her tomatoes. I asked if she could walk with me to my car in the mornings for the next few days. She looked at me, her eyes scanning the bruised worry on my face, and said, "You're not crazy, Harper. They just want you to feel alone." I nodded throat tight, because that was exactly it. This wasn't about money anymore, or property. It was about the slow erosion of identity, the gaslight flickering just bright enough to make you question your own reflection. But they didn't realize I was done questioning. I kept building. Every document, every voicemail, every photo. I made a Dropbox folder labeled "In case I disappear." Sent the link to Evan, to Dr. Lennox, to a friend in Seattle I hadn't spoken to since college. Insurance, not against death, against erasure. Then the twist. It came through an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I know Vivian." The sender was a woman named Eliza Monroe, a retired financial auditor from Dallas. She claimed to have worked with Vivian 6 years ago during her time at a non-profit board that went under investigation for misappropriation. Vivian was never charged, Eliza wrote, but she was good at covering her tracks. Too good. I always suspected she had done this before, but I had no proof. Until now. Attached were emails, not just to Riley, but to someone named Judge H. Caldwell, a family court judge. Messages about possible cooperation regarding a conservatorship case. About medical evidence and emotional irregularity. Vivian had been lobbying, preparing the legal landscape months before the fraudulent accounts ever opened. She had a plan, a full campaign, and I was the product. I forwarded the files to my attorney. He called 20 minutes later, breathless. This changes everything. We're not just talking fraud now. This is conspiracy. It might even qualify as attempted guardianship fraud under Texas Penal Code 32.46. The phrase sounded foreign. Legal. But what I heard was you were right, and I wasn't going to let her play queen one more day. We filed an injunction the next morning. I signed under oath, shaking but clear. My affidavit included all the documents, the recordings, the Eliza emails. Evan submitted his own. And by noon, the judge approved the temporary order. Vivian and Riley were now legally prohibited from initiating any financial or medical actions under my name. Control was shifting, and they knew it, which is why that night I came home to find my front door ajar. Nothing missing, no forced entry, just the smell of her perfume, Vivian's, lingering in the hallway. She had been inside. I stood in the doorway, motionless, listening. My apartment was dark, silent, but not empty. You know that instinct, the one that prickles your skin before your brain catches up. I felt it now, crawling up my spine. I reached for my phone with trembling hands and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it slowly across the entryway. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. The lamp by the window had been rotated slightly, the drawer where I kept my checkbook ajar, a cup in the sink that hadn't been there this morning. The scent of Vivian's Chanel No. 5 hung in the air like a curse, familiar all and suffocating. I backed out, locked the door from the outside, and called the police. Possible unlawful entry, I told the dispatcher, voice low and tight. Nothing stolen. Just wrong. Officers came quickly, did a walkthrough, found no signs of forced access. Could be a maintenance mix-up. One of them shrugged. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I asked them to file a report anyway, and then I did the only thing I could. I checked into a hotel near the Capitol. Cheap, clean, anonymous. That night I slept with the lights on. The next morning I called my attorney and forwarded the incident report. You think it was her? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes. We filed for a restraining order, and that's when everything shifted. A week later we were granted a hearing. The court set a date. Vivian would be legally summoned. Riley too. It wouldn't be a full trial, not yet, but it would be public record, and I could finally speak, under oath, on my terms. In the days leading up, Evan helped me prepare. Stick to the facts, he reminded me. They'll try to bait you, to make you emotional. Don't give them that story, but staying calm in front of a judge while your own family stares you down, that's a different kind of test. The hearing took place in a bland courtroom with flickering lights and walls the colour of disappointment. Vivian arrived in a navy blazer and pearls, holding a designer tote like armour. Riley flanked her, cool and expressionless, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. I didn't speak to them. I didn't look at them. The judge, middle-aged, firm but fair, called my name. I walked to the stand, heart-pounding hands icy. And I told my story. I laid out the credit fraud, the forged accounts, the conservatorship plot, the shell companies. I played the recordings. I submitted the emails. I answered every question clearly. Without venom, just truth. When it was over, the judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Quinn. Please take your seat. Then came Vivian's turn. Her lawyer painted her as a concerned mother. She was worried for her daughter's mental health, he said. The financial involvement was unfortunate, but done out of love, not malice. Vivian followed with a statement of her own. Harper has always been independent, but lately she seemed paranoid, isolating herself. We were trying to help her manage things more responsibly. I didn't flinch. I just stared at her and realized something bone deep. She believed her own story. The hearing ended with a delay on the permanent order, but the judge extended the temporary one and barred any further financial activity under my name. That night, I went back to my hotel room, exhausted but lighter. A piece of the weight had finally lifted. Then came the next twist. Evan cooled his voice tight. Someone from Riley's firm just leaked a motion. They're filing for defamation damages. Against you. I blinked. What? They're claiming the article cost Riley her clients, and that you maliciously defamed her reputation. They're demanding $500,000. My stomach dropped. Can they win? Not if we prove the article was factual and written in good faith. But they're not trying to win. They're trying to bleed you dry in court fees. They want to exhaust you. Silence settled between us. Then Evan said, "There's one way to flip this." I sat up. What is it? We countersue. For fraud, identity theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But more importantly, we subpoena Toby. I froze. Toby, the weakest link. The one who'd signed half those fake documents fumbled his way through my security questions. If we pressure him, he might flip, Evan said. He's not built for court. If he testifies that Vivian and Riley orchestrated everything, this all blows wide open. I leaned back, heart racing. If Toby talked, they were done. But if he didn't, I was looking at a legal war that could drag on for years. I closed my eyes, thought of the checkbook drawer, the cup in the sink. Then I said quietly, subpoena him. The next morning, a process server knocked on Toby's apartment door. He took the envelope with shaking hands and whispered, "What if I don't show up?" The server replied, "Then you go to jail?" Toby showed up late to the deposition. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hoodie was wrinkled eyes bloodshot, and he clutched a reusable water bottle like a talisman. His lawyer, some junior associate from a cheap firm downtown, sat beside him, flipping through papers with barely disguised panic. I was across the table with my attorney and Evan, who was there as a registered observer. The room was sterile fluorescent lights, grey carpet, no windows, but the air was electric. The court reporter asked everyone to identify themselves, then clicked the recorder on. And just like that, we were live. My lawyer went first, methodical. "Mr. Quinn, can you confirm your relationship to Harper Quinn?" Toby shifted in his seat. "She's my sister. Did you ever open a bank account in her name without her permission?" Long pause. Then, "Yes. Did you ever impersonate her on a phone call with a financial institution?" Another pause. "Yeah. Once. Maybe twice. Was this your idea?" He looked down. "No. Whose idea was it?" He hesitated. Then he said 2 words that shifted the room our mums. From there, it unraveled like wet string. Toby admitted to everything Vivian had planned. The refinancing, Riley handled the paperwork, and he was told his role was just technical. That Harper wouldn't mind. That it was safer this way. And when he said those words, I felt something break, not anger this time, but grief. Grief for the little brother who used to build Lego castles with me under the dining table. Grief for the boy who somewhere along the way became another pawn in her game. My attorney wrapped up with one last question. "Did Vivian ever threaten you?" Toby blinked. "Not directly, but she has this way of making you feel like if you say no, you're betraying the family. Like you're disposable. That was the real rot right there." After the deposition, everything happened fast. Riley tried to retract her defamation suit, but it was too late. Our countersuit was in motion. Vivian's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss the fraud charges, but the judge denied it. The press picked up the story again. This time, with Toby's testimony, it exploded. Family fraud saga deepens son, confirms mother orchestrated identity theft. 2 weeks later, the DA opened a formal investigation. But justice doesn't come like a lightning bolt, it trickles in. Vivian was indicted on 3 counts. Identity theft, financial fraud, and attempted guardianship under false pretenses. Riley lost her job at the firm. And Toby. He moved out of state, quietly ashamed, but maybe a little freer too. As for me, I didn't feel victorious. Not at first. I felt empty. Like I'd won a battle but lost the terrain of something older, something softer. I didn't speak to anyone for a week after the indictment. I turned off my phone, unplugged from everything, and drove to a tiny cabin outside Wimberley. Just me, a stack of journals, and the silence I used to fear. I thought I'd spend those days raging, crying, processing. But what I did was simpler. I sat by the creek and asked myself a single question over and over. Who am I, when I'm not trying to prove I matter to people who don't want to see me? I didn't find the full answer, but I found the beginning. 3 months later, the court ruled in my favour. All financial accounts tied to my name were dissolved or returned. My credit was restored. A restraining order was made permanent. Vivian took a plea deal to avoid jail time, probation, mandatory counselling and restitution. It wasn't justice in the Hollywood sense, but it was real, legal, documented, bound by ink instead of guilt. I moved out of Austin not long after, sold the duplex, started over in Santa Fe where the sky stretches wider and no one knows my history unless I choose to share it. I found a therapist who specializes in adult children of narcissists. I took up ceramics. I stopped apologizing before I spoke, and one day, months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a note on unlined paper scribbled in awkward handwriting. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to say no to her. I hope you can forgive me someday. T. I didn't know if I would. Not yet. But I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the back of my journal. Not as forgiveness, but as proof that even broken people sometimes tell the truth. There are still days I question everything. Was it worth it? Should I have walked away sooner? But here's what I know now. Silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the ones who hurt you. So this is me telling the story. Not because I want pity, not because I want revenge, but because when someone tries to erase you, telling the truth is the loudest, bravest thing you can do. And I'm still here. Whole, loud, free. Story 2. My parents wouldn't come to the hospital to sign the operation after I was in a car accident. Consent. Dad texted. Can't we wait? We're occupied. Instead, I gave Grandpa a call. I watched their lives burn when I issued them with eviction papers 3 weeks later. Okay, Reddit. My parents did not even bother to come for the surgery after I was in a terrible car accident. Consent. They claimed to be dining with my sister. Fortunately, I had my best buddy and my grandfather with me. I evicted them from my home lawfully 3 weeks after I recovered. However, it didn't stop there. This is what transpired. In downtown Chicago, a 34-year-old man was living the good life, earning $180,000 annually as a senior financial analyst at a large investment business. The corner office has a view of Lake Michigan. Not bad for a child who spent his childhood in Cicero, evading creditors. It was a February Friday. I was driving my BMW 5 Series North on Lakeshore Drive after finishing a client meeting in the Loop. I'm considering going out for drinks and Bulls tickets with my friend Scott. At that point, some idiot in a semi-truck made the decision to play bumper cars on black ice. In slow motion, I saw it coming. The truck skidded sideways like a 40-ton hockey puck right for my car after jackknifing across 3 lanes. I gave the wheel a violent yank. Correct. Physics, however, is a terrible mistress. At around 50 miles per hour, the lorry clipped my rear quarter panel and slammed me into the concrete median. It sounded like the sound of God smashing a can. My BMW folded like foil made of aluminum. My head whipped sideways against the driver's side window, hard enough to shatter the glass, and the airbag deployed with such force that it seemed like Mike Tyson had hit me. There was blood all over, dripping onto the floor mats I had just cleaned, pooling in my lap and running down my face. Every breath felt like someone stabbed me in the ribs with an ice pick, and my left arm was bent at an angle that was certainly not factory standard. I was just about conscious. To get me out of what was once my car, the paramedics had to use the jaws of life. I was shrieking and crunching metal for 15 minutes as I passed out and back. Amidst sirens and an EMT asking me questions like, "Do you know what year it is?" the ride to Northwestern Memorial was a haze. Are you able to move your toes? The verdict was given by trauma surgeon Dr. Morales, who had steady hands and no bedside manners. 3 shattered ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a severe concussion. We must get to work right away to fix the shoulder. Then the worst part arrived. Because of the extent of your brain injury, you lack the legal capacity to provide your consent for operation. Your next of kin must approve. My heart fell. That meant something to me. With trembling fingers, Sarah, the nurse assigned to my bay, assisted me in unlocking my phone. The initial attempt to reach Mum and Dad ended up in voicemail. Call number 2, the same thing. I got an SMS from Sarah. Was involved in a serious vehicle collision at Northwestern Memorial. I must get you here immediately. After a family supper at Celeste's place, the response arrived in less than 2 minutes. Is it possible to postpone this till tomorrow? Can you wait? They want to know if life-saving surgery can wait, since I'm physically bleeding inside. Since my sister and they are sharing a lasagna meal. As Sarah read the message, her face turned pale. She texted again. Surgery is urgently needed. Family consent is required by the hospital. This cannot wait. Silence for 5 minutes. Beeping heart monitor. Disinfectant odor mingling with my own blood. My parents' inability to leave Celeste's dinner table made me wonder if I was going to die. My phone then buzzed. We're currently quite busy. If it's really that urgent, give your granddad a call. The rage that struck me was intense. The monitor began to scare me since my blood pressure soared so much. Then everything turned dark. 3 hours later, I woke up in the intensive care unit, surrounded by more machinery than a NASA launch pad. Gerald, my grandfather, was seated next to me, still dressed in his work clothes from the car business. He said, "The surgery went fine, Dean. Shoulders are in perfect condition. The ribs will recover. Everything will be well with you." Before they transferred me to a regular room, Grandpa Gerald was at my side much of the next 2 days. I attempted to talk, but the breathing tube was roaring in my throat. He waited while passing me some ice chips. They never showed up. At last I croaked. Grandpa Gerald spent a considerable amount of time gazing out the window at the cityscape of Chicago. He turned back to me and spoke in a stern yet calm voice. "Son, not all people who are related to you are worthy of being referred to as family. After 34 years of being the responsible one, it finally hit me, the contingency plan. And they picked Celeste for stinking supper when I was literally dying. It wasn't simply the accident that made me angry. Due to Celeste's crises, they missed almost every birthday. Celeste cried with delight every time I provided them with financial support while listening to lectures about how I didn't understand family, while I gave them gifts and received generic thanks every holiday. At last, I had a complete understanding of family, and I was done being theirs. That hospital text wasn't an isolated incident, so let me to illustrate just how dysfunctional the Donovan family dynamic was. Actually, until Celeste was 6 and I was 8, life in Cicero was typical. We engaged in the usual sibling arguments, vying for the last slice of pizza and arguing over the TV remote. Bullshit from an Irish working-class family. Celeste then developed meningitis caused by bacteria. I clearly recall that night when my parents went completely crazy and she was experiencing hallucinations and a high temperature. Mum was sobbing uncontrollably into the 911 phone as Dad paced the kitchen like a caged animal. They hurried her to the emergency room. I listened to Mrs. O'Brien instruct me to pray for your sister while I was staying with the neighbours. Celeste was touch and go for 3 weeks. That hospital room was essentially where my folks moved in. Mum was on a chair sleeping. Dad used up all of his vacation days. And I figured out how to hide myself. 8 years old. In addition, I was preparing for school, working alone on schoolwork. While my parents kept their vigil at St. Mary's, I ate cereal for dinner. Good lads were instructed to answer fine when their neighbours inquired about my well-being. The family never healed, but Celeste did. All of a sudden, she was this delicate princess who required continual guardianship. Brushed across her toe, like it was a relapse Mum would freak out. Received a B+ on an exam. Avoid pressuring her. She is still getting better. And the clever little manipulator Celeste. She quickly realised that her ticket to Easy Street was to play the victim. Refused to perform household tasks. The drug is making my head hurt. Desired a new toy. These days I get fatigued so easily. Wished to avoid obligations to family. I feel lightheaded in crowds. In the meantime, I'm completing tasks without being asked and earning straight A's. God forbid I cause them more stress while they're still coping with Celeste's recuperation by high school, so I never complain about anything. Celeste used her medical background as leverage to land a full-time job. Every time she was asked to do anything, she would sigh loudly and roll her eyes. Then say, "I'm just so tired today," while gazing at your mother with large doe eyes. Mum would step in right away. "You relax, of course, honey. Since Celeste was 16 and in excellent health, I won't recommend that she assist with yard chores. She could have curdled milk with the glare she gave me." "Some of us have real health problems to deal with," she continued in that sarcastic tone. "Not everyone is as fortunate by nature as you are." Dad supported her right away. "You're too smart to push your sister Dean. She's experienced enough." That became the motto of the family. Celeste has experienced enough. Enough to absolve her of all obligations, expectations, and fundamental needs for a functioning human being, the part that's really twisted. I began to wish that I had fallen ill instead. At least then the roles were clearly defined, and perhaps they would care about me the way they did about her by college. Celeste was the priceless bloom that required continual guardianship. I was the dependable workhorse who didn't require the most basic human decency. The practice was so deep-rooted that they continued to put her dinner arrangements ahead of my potentially fatal injuries when I was bleeding out in a hospital bed. Wishes do come true for certain people. I only wish I had discovered 26 years ago that their love was never something worth pursuing. The Donovan family was struck by financial devastation in 2008 like a freight train. During the recession, Dad's little trucking business failed. Not only struggling, but utterly destroyed. Obligation of $800,000. Foreclosure notices pinned to our front door like scarlet letters and hourly calls from creditors. I'll never forget entering the kitchen and seeing my father sobbing like a broken man while seated at the table with his head in his hands. His mother was massaging his shoulders as tears poured down her cheeks, and the foreclosure papers were laid out before him. "Everything will be lost for us," he cried. "I let you all down." Seeing my family's financial ruin at the age of 18, I made a choice that would shape the ensuing 10 years of my life. I would be the one to make it right. After receiving a full scholarship to the University of Illinois at Chicago, I started working 3 jobs right away. 5 a.m. at Starbucks, library on campus till 3 p.m. On the weekends, I tutor wealthy North Shore children, 45 hours per week, with a GPA of 3.9, because if I failed, my family would have to live with Celeste and their car. She continued her work as a professional victim while attending a community college. In the meantime, I'm working 3 jobs, attending school full-time, and grinding myself to dust in order to make ends meet on $800 a month. When family members questioned Celeste about her lack of employment, Mom would become defensive. She is concentrating on her studies. Not everyone has Dean's level of tolerance. After earning a finance degree with honours 4 years later, I was hired by JP Morgan Chase at a salary of $95,000. I was being celebrated by the majority of my classmates. I was too preoccupied figuring out how I was going to accumulate enough money to purchase a condo in River North by the time I was 26. Nice location. Fantastic lake view. Something that was mine at last. I knew what would happen, so I didn't even notify the family. And sure enough, with shaky hands and red-rimmed eyes, that Thanksgiving Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "We can't continue to rent this space in Cicero, Dean," she remarked. "It's getting rough in the neighborhood. Additionally, twice last month, your father's truck was broken into. We need a secure location." They had perfected the guilt trip. What then did trustworthy, responsible Dean do? I spent my entire funds of $400,000 for a Mount Prospect home. 2 vehicle garages and 4 bedrooms. The largest crime in this pleasant suburban community was someone failing to pick up their dog. Shei-chi-ti. On Christmas morning, I handed over the keys and received an emotional embrace from my mother. She cried, "You're such a good son." A mother could not ask for a better son. That feeling of warmth persisted for precisely 6 weeks. The follow-up call then arrived. "Dean, with only your father and me rambling around, this lovely house feels empty. In order for Celeste to move in with us, would you perhaps consider getting something larger? Her predicament with her roommate is causing her problems." Celeste was 25 years old, worked for a marketing company, and was more than capable of managing her own living situation. However, it seems that for someone with such fragile constitution, being an adult was too stressful. She can locate a space of her own. I said, "She has everything including a job." Mum's tone instantly changed to that of a martyr. "When did you get so icy, Dean? Celeste still hasn't reached her full potential and makes half as much as you do. Family is helpful." "Family, huh?" "For example, my family decided to have dinner instead of emergency surgery when I was bleeding out in the hospital. I allowed them to bring Celeste into the house I had paid for with my own money and effort, because I wasn't yet prepared for that battle. For the following 6 years, I watched my pampered sister treat my gift as if it were her birthright. While they were playing house in Mount Prospect, I was the family ATM. The house's damage totaled an astounding $400,000, while Celeste's remaining tuition expenditures, emergency auto repairs, medical bills, and $2,400 per month for groceries and utilities were also incurred. I wanted to feel loved. Therefore, I'll give it to you. I was the supplier. Everyone acted as though their lovely family life was normal, until the day I ended up bleeding and broken, at which point their actual priorities became apparent. It was a bitch to recover from that crash. I had to endure months of battling insurance vultures, 6 weeks of physical treatment and psychological trauma that made me jump whenever I heard brakes screaming. However, that nightmare had 2 positive outcomes. I rediscovered what true friendship looked like when I met Ellie. Since my first year at UIC, Scott Alvarez has been my closest friend. Despite having a linebacker's build, Guy had a golden retriever's heart and a sailor's mouth. Scott was the relaxed mechanical engineering student who magically aced everything despite hardly reading a book, whereas I was the stiff finance major who worried about every test. Classic Scott was his response when I called him from the hospital. "In 20 minutes, I'll be there. Are you in need of anything, snacks? Periodicals? Whoever did this to you deserves a hitman. For you, that's Scott." He arrived with a thermos of coffee, the newest Sports Illustrated, and a bag of my favorite beef jerky. I didn't inquire about my parents' whereabouts, didn't give me a family lecture. He simply kept me company while parking his ass in that awful hospital chair. What does this remind me of? I was having a tirade about family loyalty when he said that. When you lent Brad your car in college, he returned it with 3 dents and no gas left in it. Do you recall what you did? I didn't lend him any more money. That's right. During those weeks when every Donovan relative called to make me feel bad about leaving my family, Scott served as a reality check for me. Your Aunt Deborah would think you're a jerk for not being a doormat anymore after he listened to me complain over the most recent phone call and said something along those lines. The same Aunt Deborah who, after forgetting your birthday for 3 consecutive years, remembered to request a loan from you. Yes, her viewpoints are really significant. Ellie was unique, yet just as significant. As my physical therapist, she witnessed me at my worst flinching during workouts, having trouble lifting my arm and experiencing panic attacks any time someone brought up auto accidents. She never did, however, treat me like a patient. She gave me human-like treatment. "You're not damaged," she would say, when I became impatient with my lackluster progress. "Your recovery." There is a distinction. Ellie, a straight shooter from Bridgeport, was the daughter of a teacher and a Chicago police officer. In her area of work, she had witnessed enough dysfunction in families to instantly identify poisonous tendencies. During one appointment, she assured me that your shoulder would be okay. However, if you don't deal with the guilt you're holding, it will take longer to recover. She didn't push, simply listened to me and provided insight when I requested it. She nodded as if she had heard the story 100 times when I told her about the years she had spent as the family ATM. The Donovan family drama engine went into overdrive during the ensuing shitstorm, and Scott and Ellie became my anchors. It was they who reminded me that love is not a transaction in typical families. "What does normal look like? Do you know?" Scott inquired. My mum would have broken speed restrictions to get to that hospital one night after drinking. Hell, if it had down to that, she would have done the surgery herself. It finally clicked at that point. True love manifests. There are no excuses in true love. Every day, simply by being there, Scott and Ellie demonstrated that to me. I stopped playing games 3 weeks after I was released from the hospital. It's time to defend yourself and let the Donovan family know what happens when goodwill is misinterpreted as weakness. I entered the office of one of the most dreaded family law lawyers in Chicago, Janet Morrison. The woman was known for charging by the hour for the privilege of eating opposing counsel's breakfast. She leaned back in her chair and grinned like a shark that smells blood after hearing my story. "You have a strong case for property recovery, Mr. Donovan," she stated. "You are the owner of the house. You have records showing their denial of emergency aid when you most needed it, and you can demonstrate financial ownership. This is not merely lawful, it makes sense. How much time must I give them? 30 days as usual. However, as the owner, you are reclaiming the property for your own use. In certain situations, Illinois law permits a 72-hour notice. Considering their actions and your intention to utilize the property for your own purposes, we can proceed with the expedited schedule. 72 hours. Christmas morning in reverse. After taking a long breath, I decided to draft the documents and destroy the family dynamic from orbit. On a Tuesday morning, a sheriff's deputy delivered the eviction notice. Tidy, easy, tragic. Give notice to stop. You must now resign and give the owner of the aforementioned property your possessions. You have 72 hours to leave. Within an hour, the phone call began. Dad's angry voice was the first to shake. "What the devil is this, Dean? You cannot simply evict us from our house. Our house. Out of misplaced loyalty. I had given them the house I had purchased with my own money. Dad, it's my house. I'm getting my property back, following all that we have done for you. How do you pay us back? What have you done for me specifically, because you invited Celeste to dinner when I was bleeding out in the hospital?" Quiet. Next is the traditional Donovan pivot. That was not the same. How serious it was unknown to us. "I required emergency surgery, I told you. You appear to be doing well presently." Click. The first bridge was destroyed by fire. 20 minutes later, Mum called. "Full-scale waterworks. Don't do this, Dean, please. We are your parents. You are loved by us. People in hospitals are not abandoned by love." Mum. Avoid being theatrical. It's not as though You are incapable of managing things on your own. What I'm doing is that. You have 60 hours remaining. Celeste was the last to call, and her demeanour was that of an entitled princess. You are behaving like a pampered child who has been let down. Both Mum and Dad are elderly. They cannot just be made homeless. Observe me. I will fight this. I'll make legal calls. I will ensure that everyone is aware of your true character. I realised then that I had made the proper decision. Proceed. I have documentation of everything, I said. I hope you can convince a jury of Dad's hospital text. The following 48 hours were a masterclass in dysfunctional families. I was getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in a long time. All of a sudden, they are worried about Christian forgiveness and family values. Dad's sister, Aunt Deborah, was the main attraction. She called and yelled about what a cold-hearted monster I had turned into. She yelled, "You're dumping old people on the street." How would Jesus feel? Jesus would undoubtedly question their decision to forego their son's urgent surgery in favour of dinner. I answered, "They can live with you, though, if you're really worried about their housing situation." Suddenly, there was silence. It's funny how real sacrifice causes family unity to erode. "I mean, I have no space." She turned around. "Then stop talking." I blocked her number after hanging up. I kind of expected them to obey in silence as the 72-hour deadline drew near. The Donovans had always placed a high value on keeping up appearances, avoiding conflict and keeping personal matters quiet. I ought to have been more aware. Their meal ticket eventually retaliated, just as they were about to show me how bad things could get. Around 9 p.m. on Thursday, I was reading and having a drink in my condo in River North when my doorman called Mr. Donovan. "3 individuals here are posing as members of your family. Their will to come up is unwavering." I saw my dad's beaten up as I looked out my window. In the loading area, Ford parked. Through the lobby glass, hazards blink. All 3 of them were visible to me. There was Celeste with her arms crossed, sporting that entitled smile I'd come to despise, Dad puffing up his chest, and Mom clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Lift them up," I informed the doorman. "We might as well finish this." The anger was evident as soon as I opened the door. With Mom and Celeste right behind him, Dad pushed by me and into the flat as if he owned it. It was astounding how entitled they were. Not even a greeting. Simply barging into my house as if they were perfectly entitled to be there. Michael Dean Donovan. My father resumed using my entire name as if I were 12 years old. This insanity must end immediately. We will forget this entire incident ever occurred if you cancel this eviction. Not at all. Shutting the door behind them, I said, "I'm not." Celeste lunged at once. "That's really normal of you. Don't you think that everything must always be about you? Dean is having a tantrum because he didn't receive enough attention." Her tone of disdain was poisonous. I have been harbouring animosity in my living room for 26 years. As I walked to my bar cart and poured another drink, I said, "You're right. It concerns me. For the first time since I became an adult. Rather than considering what you will need from me, I'm making decisions based on what I want." Mum gave the waterworks method a try. "Dean, this is not how we brought you up. Family never deserts family. You could cut the irony with a knife because it was so thick. You were the first to desert me," I said, sipping from a hospital bed as I was bleeding. "And you opted for dinner, rather of urgent surgery." Dad's face flushed. We clarified that we were unsure of the severity of the situation. "I needed surgery, I told you. What was unclear about that?" "You look good now." Celeste rolled her eyes in response. "You're exaggerating." Something inside of me exploded at that moment. It's time for shock treatment. I took out my phone and launched the app for my bank. Are you curious about what dramatic looks look like? This is a list of all the money I have sent this family in the last 10 years. Would you like me to read it aloud, $150,000 for groceries and utilities over 4 years and $400,000 for the house. Urgent auto repairs and hospital expenses. Celeste's remaining tuition costs. An additional $47,000. The grand total, $562,200. Like a bomb, the number lingered in the air. I went on more than $500,000, and you didn't even bother to drive the 20 minutes to the hospital when I needed you for a single night when I was literally dying. We reimbursed you. Mom objected. With what? Love. Assistance. Fundamental human dignity, since none of those have been demonstrated to me. At last, Celeste's mask came off entirely. Dean, please spare us the martyr act. You wanted to feel important, which is why you gave us that money. You want the big shot brother to be able to handle everyone's issues. Don't pretend that it didn't benefit you. The truth was there. All of them had been thinking, but they lacked the courage to express it. You're correct. I do want to feel important, I said. I desired to experience love. I desired a familial feeling. It took me 34 years to realize that would never occur. Dad made one final attempt at power play. You are dead to us if you carry out this eviction. Dead. This family will never accept you again. I burst out laughing, which obviously wasn't what they were expecting. I told you that I was dead? You haven't seen me in years. Celeste made her biggest error at that point. She took a step forward and gestured to my chest. Dean, you're going to regret this. I will ensure that everyone is aware of your true character. I'll ruin your career, your reputation, everything. You'll be pleading with us to take you back once I'm through with you. I approached the door and flung it open. You have 18 hours to leave my property. The sheriff will be there to help you if you aren't out by Saturday at noon. I wish you luck in locating a place that takes renters without requiring a down payment. Additionally, they have a history of believing that generosity from others is their natural inheritance. In startled silence, they poured out Celeste, giving me a hateful glare as she went by. As I watched them make their way to the elevator, I noticed that Dad's attempt to smash my door was foiled by one of those slow-moving devices. It was a feeling I hadn't had in years. Total contentment with my choice. I was at last prepared to battle, and the war was about to start. With a smug smirk on my face, Scott rode shotgun as I drove to Mount Prospect on Saturday at noon. A locksmith, a sheriff's deputy, and a small moving truck that I'd rented to move their crap to the curb were already there. The Donovans had already decided. They intended to make this as challenging, as dramatic as they could. Naturally, they remained there because it seemed that they were incapable of obeying basic legal directives. While Mom stood on the porch steps, sobbing into a tissue, Dad was on the front lawn, shouting at the deputy about tenant rights and illegal eviction. Celeste was likely phoning every person in Chicago to portray herself as the victim of her violent brother's oppression. Scott cracked his knuckles and exclaimed, "Showtime. You want the heavy lifting done by me? No, I'd rather enjoy this." As I exited the car, the deputy approached. "We're prepared to move forward with the eviction, Mr. Donovan. I just need your confirmation that you wish to proceed." "Of course." Dean. With the red-faced wrath I recalled from my boyhood, Dad yelled and stormed over. "This is not possible. We are your parents." "He can, in fact," calmly Deputy Williams said. "Legal notice has been given to you that this is his property. You have 20 minutes to get your personal items. Everything else remains." Celeste screamed like a banshee across the lawn. "This is harassment. Mistreatment. Ma'am," the deputy continued, "I'm calling the news. You're trespassing on private property when you contact someone from the street, but you can call anyone you want." The following 20 minutes were anarchy. As she threw random objects into garbage bags, Mom began crying. Dad muttered something about lawsuits and attorneys. Celeste was recounting the entire event live on Instagram as if she were recording war crimes. She said to her phone's camera, This is my brother, Dean Donovan, making sure to include my vehicle plate in the picture. He is a psychopathic narcissist who is evicting his elderly parents from their house. Scott pushed me. Do you understand every single syllable? As they packed their Ford with their possessions. Dad tried a guilt trip one final time. Dean, you're ruining this family. I hope you can sleep at night when we're in a shelter because of you. I told you, Dad, that you have credit and jobs. Aunt Deborah is really worried about your well-being. Just like any other grown-up, figure it out. Celeste attempted to steal a few pieces of furniture. The 65-inch TV, the leather couch, and the dining room set, all claimed to be family treasures. Ma'am, according to Deputy Williams, everything in this residence was bought by Mr. Donovan and is his property. You are only allowed to bring your own clothes and belongings. Her expression of pure rage was priceless. Celeste rolled down her window and yelled, "I'm going to destroy you, Dean," as they drove off. They'll all realize what a monster you are. Anticipating it, I returned to the call. Scott was smiling. That was gorgeous, dude. She actually threatened to ruin your reputation on camera and in front of a police officer. The best thing I know is that she believes she has a grand scheme to destroy me. Doesn't know. I have been keeping a record of everything. Once more, the house was mine. A new beginning, a clean slate, and the priciest family dynamics lesson ever bought. I poured myself a drink, installed a security system, and replaced all the locks that evening. I listed the house for $3,200 a month on the rental market the following morning. Within a week, a pleasant young couple who paid first rented it, and in advance, last month. Not a drama. As promised, Celeste began her social media offensive with TikTok videos, Instagram stories about family tragedy, Facebook messages about her violent brother, and sobs about being homeless due to greed. The entire victim tale script. She didn't know what was going to happen. Celeste lost her mind 3 weeks later. When my ghostly pale assistant knocked on the door, I was in my office going over quarterly reports. Make sure you see this, Mr. Donovan. A Facebook post about you is gaining a lot of traction. According to the website, people share their private problems with strangers on the internet in a group called Chicago Family Drama. For pictures, Celeste had uploaded a masterful alteration that would have pleased Stalin. As they packed boxes, Mom and Dad looked heartbroken. An image of the moving truck outside their residence. On the front steps, Mom was sobbing as if everything had ended. And the official corporate website features my professional headshot, since nothing says villain like a man in a business suit. It was a poisonous caption. This is downtown Chicago financial analyst Dean Donovan. His elderly parents had been staying in their home for the past 2 years while assisting him in his recuperation, but he recently forced them out. He chose to punish them by rendering them homeless after they were unable to leave everything to come see him in the hospital following a minor auto accident. Conscience cannot be purchased with money. It had 3,000 shares in 6 hours. The comments were an absolute massacre. How could a monster treat his own parents like this? Someone ought to discover this psychopath's workplace. I hope he receives positive karma. Notifications, friend requests from random people, and notes labeling me anything from a sociopath to a waste of oxygen began to buzz on my phone. My LinkedIn profile had been discovered, and the screenshot was being shared there. My family abuse was mentioned in 1-star evaluations written by another genius who found my company's website. The post received over 2,000 comments and 1,000 shares before the end of the day. It was being shared by local Facebook groups in Chicago. My employer summoned me to his office the following morning. It appeared that Mr. Patterson would much prefer have a root canal. Dean, a social media post has prompted more than 200 calls and emails. Customers are posing inquiries. If we keep you on staff, some are threatening to remove their accounts. I felt sick to my stomach. Are you going to fire me not firing? However, I require that you take a leave of absence. paid naturally. However, till this passes. I returned to Janet Morrison's office that afternoon with a bulky folder of evidence, after going over everything Mr. Donovan Morrison explained. This is a classic case of defamation. She made untrue claims that hurt your reputation and reduced your earnings. Our case is a no-brainer. Morrison grinned. It's going to be enjoyable. I was sitting in Cook County Circuit Court 6 months later, watching in real time as Celeste's lies came to light. The courtroom was full. A few reporters who had learned about the case, Donovan family members in the rear rows, and Scott in the front row, recording everything on his phone for future generations. Janet Morrison had put together an entirely legal battle. Professional reputation analysts, the Crown Gem expert witnesses on social media, damage and every screenshot that is time-stamped and documented. From the first day, the entire courtroom could see Dad's hospital text message displayed on a poster board. The nuclear option was Morrison's first choice. She read the jury Dad's text out loud. "Can't we wait? We're currently quite busy. Give your grandfather a call if it's essential." A pin could be heard dropping. In fact, a number of jurors appeared repulsed. The judge silenced Celeste's attorney when he attempted to raise an objection. Morrison added, "This text message was sent while my client was unconscious in the intensive care unit and needed emergency surgery. After deciding to forego a medical emergency in favor of supper, the defendants began a systematic harassment campaign. Celeste's lawyer attempted to portray me as the vengeful rich guy punishing his impoverished family when my client used his legal right to recover his own property. He made a pitiful opening statement. Dean Donovan used his fortune on the people who loved and raised him. The second day, the social media specialists provided testimony. A specialist in online reputation damage. Dr. Martinez took the jury through each sharing comment and instance of abuse that Celeste's post had sparked. According to the defendant's testimony, her post received over 8,000 shares and over 2,000 negative comments. More than 500 times the tag number, "Dean Donovan is a monster," was used. The plaintiff's professional reputation has suffered significant and long-lasting harm as a result. After that, Mr. Patterson, my boss, testified regarding the effect it had on my career. Hundreds of emails and phone calls were sent to us requesting that Mr. Donovan be fired. A number of significant clients threatened to sever ties with our company. Putting him on administrative leave was our only option. It was a carnage on the third day when Celeste finally took the stand, like a lion with a gazelle. Morrison ripped her to pieces. "Did you check any of the statements in your Facebook post before posting them?" Miss Donovan: "Yes, but I was feeling sentimental. Did you indicate that your brother used his own funds to buy the house?" "Well, no. However, did you say that he had provided for your family for more than 10 years? That is irrelevant. When my parents attempted to defend Celeste in court, Morrison also ruined them." The jury spent precisely 47 minutes deliberating. The foreman read the verdict with little emotion when they got back. In the Donovan versus Donovan case, we determined that the plaintiff is entitled to $98,000 in damages. Celeste fell back in her seat as if she'd been shot. Without saying anything, her partner, who had been seated in the back, stood up and left. Mom broke down in tears. Dad looked up at the ceiling as if he were asking God to help him. Celeste turned to face me, her eyes full of hate, as the judge dismissed the jury. I gave her a small wave and smiled. Celeste completed her design business in a week. When clients learned she was facing a 6-figure judgment, they began terminating contracts. She was blocked on all platforms by her ex-boyfriend. After living in a run-down apartment in Cicero, Mom and Dad were forced to move in with Aunt Deborah. Before Deborah evicted them for being unappreciative house guests who caused chaos in her home, it lasted precisely 2 weeks. I continued to get rental revenue from the Mount Prospect house, $3,200 a month, which symbolized the Donovan family's total inability to comprehend the repercussions. That spring, Ellie and I were married in a modest ceremony. Only those who were truly important. My best man Scott made half of the attendees cry with his speech about loyalty. At the altar, Grandpa Gerald murmured to me as he led Ellie down the aisle, "This one will be kept." There was no invitation for the Donovan family. It felt fitting that Facebook would be the source of their knowledge about the wedding. I received a text message from an unidentified number 6 months after the trial. "I hope all is well with you. You are the reason we lost everything." I blocked the number and removed the text. It's no longer my problem that certain individuals never learn. The house continues to bring in money. Heavenly. Continuing to share victim-related content on social media. She must now reveal, however, that she lost a defamation action for lying about family members, which resulted in damages and legal bills of almost $100,000. And me, knowing that I've finally figured out the difference between being a decent son and being a punching bag, makes me sleep like a baby every night. Now the rental income is directly deposited into my daughter's education fund. We already have plans to teach our children something that the Donovan family never learnt, and Ellie is pregnant. Love is not a business. Loyalty involves both parties. Furthermore, family never deserts family. Living a good life is sometimes the finest kind of retaliation. But a 6-figure settlement for legal retaliation. It's also not horrible.